Welcome to this edition of World Business Commentary. My name is Belinda Boggs and my co-host is Kristen Ciccarello. Today's topic is the Federal Reserve's goal to increase unemployment. Chairman Powell has stated a number of times that unemployment must increase for the Fed to stop raising rates. Is unemployment the cause of today's inflation? Could raising rates actually create more inflation? Kristen, in a previous episode you explained that the role of the Fed was to manage both employment and inflation. Can you explain the relationship between the two?
Certainly. Remember that Congress has given the Fed two co-equal goals for monetary policy. First, maximum employment, and, second, stable prices, meaning low, stable inflation. Inflation is hovering around 6% and unemployment is near an all-time low. But is unemployment the cause of inflation? The relationship between inflation and unemployment is known as the Phillips Curve, but it has not been a reliable predictor of inflation since the 1960s. The Phillips Curve is an economic theory that inflation and unemployment have a stable and inverse relationship. Developed by William Phillips, it claims that with economic growth comes inflation, which in turn should lead to more jobs and less unemployment. During the 1970s, the U.S. experienced stagflation, simultaneous high unemployment and inflation. More recently, after the Great Recession, unemployment dropped from 10% to about 4% from 2009 through 2018, yet inflation had not risen during that period.
So, does Chairman Powell still believe in the Phillips curve? Does it still make sense?
I'm not sure what Mr. Powell believes about the Phillips curve. When I had studied economics in college in the 1990s, we had learned that the Phillips curve was simply proven false by the experience of the 1970s. Let's get into the Phillips curve discussion some more. What is the debate about? Proponents of the Phillips curve saw unions as a force that would increase wages excessively, causing inflation whenever the labor market approached full employment. Famous economist Milton Friedman argued that the economy would always return to its natural rate of unemployment. He defined the natural rate as the minimum unemployment rate compatible with a stable rate of inflation, as determined by the structure of the labor market. So, monetary policy could not push unemployment beyond this natural rate for long. Soon enough, people's inflation expectations would adjust and employment would return to the natural rate. Many economists took issue with this, saying that Friedman was unfairly defining away the conflict between the two policy goals. I believe, however, that Friedman has been proven right. Remember that Friedman firmly believed that inflation was always caused by too high a rate of growth in the quantity of money, which in turn caused demand to outstrip supply. I have always believed that to be true as well. However, this time, we might be experiencing a unique situation. This isn't the 1970s. Demand is outstripping supply, but supply is still recovering from the shutdowns of 2020. By the way, for you out there watching on YouTube, if you like what you've heard so far, please subscribe to our channel and give us a big thumbs up.
Great. Now back to unemployment and inflation. Are you saying that Phillips curve might turn out to be correct? Or, are you saying that inflation might not be caused by too much money this time?
Well, I'm not saying that definitively. We definitely have had a major increase in the money supply and a huge increase in government spending, so the rate of growth of the money supply had increased in 2020 and 2021. I just see this as a unique situation. There was a very loose monetary policy in place from 2008 until now, and no inflation showed up until 2021. I believe a reduction in supply is a key issue. Remember last time when I mentioned that when there is too much demand and not enough supply, prices increase? Inflation, right?
Exactly.
But, supply was reduced by the pandemic. I actually believe that bolstering the supply would solve the problem. This, however, cannot be done by the Federal Reserve.
Okay. So, what can be done? Who would do it?
Let me begin by explaining basic supply and demand. Encyclopedia Britannica states, quote, "The price of a commodity is determined by the interaction of supply and demand in a market. The resulting price is referred to as the equilibrium price and represents an agreement between producers and consumers of the good. In equilibrium, the quantity of a good supplied by producers equals the quantity demanded by consumers. Unquote. Now, we know that when demand increases due to an increase in income, for example, price will increase. But, is that what's going on right now? Or, as we see in this graph, do we have a shift in supply? Supply has decreased in this example from S to S1. When this happens, price increases. So, if this is the case and supply has decreased, how can we get supply to increase? Well, a lot of people thought that given a little time, supply would catch up on its own. This hasn't happened. Government policies can affect supply. For example, what effects does increasing regulation or increasing taxes have on supply?
I suppose that when taxes are increased, that increases the cost to the supplier. The same is true for regulation. Regulation can make it more expensive to produce.
Exactly. I believe we've had several things working against us here in the United States. Much more regulation since 2021 has crushed supply, especially of oil and gas. Some might view that as a good thing, but more expensive energy makes everything more expensive. Another factor is the Russia-Ukraine war, which also reduced the supply of energy as well as commodities such as wheat. It might make sense for our lawmakers here in the United States to look for ways to reduce regulation and even taxes to create incentive to increase supply. Another thing that can be done is cutting government spending. Government spending, according to Milton Friedman, is another way to increase the quantity of money and create inflation, and we've had plenty of that.
Is this your theory, the idea that regulation decreases supply?
No, not at all. Milton Friedman also talked a lot about regulation. He was one of the greatest advocates of a free market. He believed that regulation was bad for the consumer and resulted in higher prices. This may be a contributing factor to the kind of price increases we are seeing today. Here's one other thought to ponder, and this doesn't come from Milton Friedman. But, is it possible that the increasing interest rates might hurt supply further? Higher rates makes business investment more expensive, inhibiting expansion, which is the opposite of what we need. For those of you watching on YouTube, what do you think about this idea? The idea that raising interest rates might actually decrease supply by reducing business investment. This would result in stagflation. We will have continuing inflation with higher unemployment. More pain. Leave a comment if you have a thought on this.
Interesting concept. Let me see if I can summarize what we've said here today. Currently, we have a high rate of inflation and very low unemployment. There had been a theory called the Phillips Curve that postulated an inverse relationship between the two. If you want lower inflation, you have to have more unemployment. But this theory has been shown to be untrue, at least in the 1970s and 2010s. You're proposing the idea that this inflation is primarily caused by a lack of supply as a result of the pandemic. This has been exacerbated by increased regulation. Your proposal is to consider encouraging an increase in supply through fiscal policy and regulatory policy. In other words, less regulation and lower taxes. This will lower producers' costs and create the incentive for more production and lower prices for the consumer. Further, we could reduce government spending to help reduce inflation without affecting producers as much. And you are proposing a radical idea, that raising interest rates might actually decrease supply further by making it more expensive to do business. Wow! That's a lot you've covered in just 10 minutes. That's our segment for today. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed it.